Hello, everybody. This is Pastor Randall. Welcome to our Bible study here at Loudon United Methodist as we stroll through the Bible, looking at Judges chapters 1, 2, and the first part of chapter 3. When the book of Judges begins, the land in Joshua has mostly been conquered. Now, the Gentiles have been pushed to the margins. The Canaanites, the Jebusites, the Perizzites, the Hivites. The whole menu has been pushed. Judges begins with Judah and these other tribal leaders kind of taking it up instead of it being everybody's work and the tribes' work to push the Canaanites out. Now, at first, there's early successes. Then there starts to be failures, and the Canaanites are left in the land. Joshua dies and says his goodbyes. And so then we are left with this. Chapter 3 begins with a catalog, a listing of the people who are left. And so what we see here is the sort of idealistic, we're going to clear the land and we're never going to have any problems, is not going to happen. Judges has already set the table for that. Ironically enough, I mentioned back in Joshua that the sieges of Jericho was greatly detailed, and then the siege of Ai, because one, it's just the second, and number two, there is the trouble that comes with it, were more detailed. Then the rest kind of just were told almost matter-of-factly, because kind of like a horror movie sets the stage by giving you the gruesome scene, and then the rest of it is kind of told in quick cuts. There's different storytelling technique here. We get the setup, and they do go out of their way very much to give us the geography. When you read chapters 1 and 2 and then start of 3, it sort of paints a map of you, for you, a map of the people. And then we get our first Savior, but our first Savior doesn't really get a great story comparatively. So the people are, the nation of Israel is there. They have settled. They have defeated their enemies for the most part, driven them to the margins. But then we are told in 3:7, the Israelites did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, forgetting the Lord their God and worshiping the Baals and the Asherahs. Now this is, of course, I think outsiders and enemies don't really give you the time of day, and they have lumped all of the Canaanite deities, which there will be many, different cultures. It's kind of like if we painted a broad brush and we said, well, all Asians do this. You don't do that. But Baal is a sky god, very much keeping the same, almost a lot of the same. I mean, he's the king of the gods. He's the sky god. He's the giver of life and fertility, which leads into, at least the Bible tells us, that if you worship Baal, you have to pass your children through fire. We're not really sure, archaeologically speaking, historically speaking, if this was a sacrifice or a ritual that was like a sacrifice. But of course, in the Bible, it's presented as they did child murder. You burned up your first child so you could have more children, which of course would be vile and awful by any standard, but especially by the God of Israel does not like that. And Asherah is a female chieftain goddess, and so Baal and Asherah become the catchphrase for all sorts of gods. That's why they are pluralized, the Baals and the Asherans. And so that's a weird turn of phrase, but it's almost like, again, you remember the writers of this are not fans, right? And in fact, many are writing probably never have actually met a Canaanite to ask them the details of their gods, right? So they've turned away from God, which I think happens because we see it happening a lot here in Israel. I think part of that is, since God is the God of everything, people start hedging their bets with specific gods. And then slowly you start from hedging your bets to drifting away. So, therefore, the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he sold them out into the hand of King Cushan. He's an Amorite. And they served him for 8 years. But when the Israelites cried out to the Lord raised up a deliverer for the Israelites, who delivered them. Othniel, son of Kenzah, Caleb's younger brother. Remember Caleb, Joshua, Caleb. The Spirit of the Lord came upon him, and he judged Israel. He went out to war, and the Lord gave him the king. And so the land had rest 40 years. And then Othniel, son of Kenaz, son of Kenaz, died. And so we get our first deliverance. They're still Gentiles, and the Gentiles now kind of serve a strange purpose for God, that they will raise up and they will cause trouble only when the people falter. And with that, with our next video, we're going to talk about Ehud, who is one of my favorites, mainly because we're both left-handed, and we'll talk a little bit about that next time. Thank you very much for being with me, and God bless.